like to call the November meeting of the Tellico Village POA Board to session. I'd like to welcome everybody that's attended and everybody that's joined us on the live stream. And as you were mentioned, as the process is, as we go through any topic, I'll call for any board discussion or questions, then I'll call for open discussion and questions, at which time you can go to the mic so all that are on live stream can hear. And if anybody on the live stream has questions, they can submit them there, and we've got Beth and others monitoring that so we get their questions as well. So with that, we'll go to the minutes of the October meeting. Can I have a motion to approve, please? Pat, motion, and Bob, second. So, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes to the October meeting, please raise your right hand. 7-0 passed. With that, we'll move on to the operations report. Chet?
Righty then. Let's see. Let's start out with. Oh yeah, better. Everybody got it now? Okay, cool. This month, the net income was $964,000 for September, which is $589,000 over budget. And let's see, total revenue exceeded budget by $411,000, but expenses were $289,000 lower than the budget. So we're in good shape in that regard. Under HR, we have filled all the personnel slots that we had intended to, except we are still looking for a purchasing agent, and that's mostly because we are still trying to determine exactly how we want that person, we want that person to do and how they do it. If we look at communications and commercial this month, we are, interestingly enough, we have a higher number for discovery requests now than we did last year, significantly. Last year it was 104 for the month of October, and this year it was 149, which means the interest in our community is up, and that's a good thing. The closing of lots, we are down from last year. Last year we closed this month 246. This month we did 153. Under food service, the yacht club, probably for no other reason than attrition, sales are up, and had a lot of banquet sales in October, and pretty much up a lot. One note, the Thanksgiving buffet for the yacht club is almost sold out with 400 guests so far. Toco Clubhouse sales, they were in the 169,500, and they total sales is $1.2 million for the year. Kahiti Clubhouse for October was 60,000, and year to date is 517K. ACC codes, 45 miscellaneous permits were put in last month. We have 253 single-family homes, and year to date for miscellaneous permits is 357. We currently have 286 homes under construction, 2 of which are multifamily. Public Works is up in terms of sewer tank installs from last year, and regrettably the sewer leaks are up from last year, and the water leaks are down from last year, 133 versus 185. Also in Public Works right now, they are in the process of finishing up getting prepared for the Chota Road project, and we will begin to make some movements with the traffic lights and those kinds of things. Is Clayton in here? Clayton, what did TDOT say about the traffic light? Come to the mic. Thank you.
The engineering traffic count report has been submitted to TDOT Traffic Division, and they're still under review.
Roger that. Okay. If that is approved, then they're going to have the light up, and it'll be running for a few days before we actually turn it on, and that will dictate when we can begin the Chota Road project. Trash services providers, we're down to 3, and it looks like we're going to be pretty much down to 1. One of the challenges with the trash service is that most of them do not want to do recycling, and so we're looking at what our options are to be able to continue to have some form of recycling within the community. We'll be putting that out as soon as we've come to the bid of choice. In terms of the Tanasi Restoration Project, we are installing the cart barn today, and well, this rest of this week. The pad's already been done, it's already been paved, and we should be able to move all the golf carts into that cart barn for Tanasi probably beginning of next week. All the infrastructure for that being the power and the IT implementation necessary to upgrade or update, excuse me, the carts will all be in place at that time. Let's see, what else we got here? Rounds of golf. We are set right now. Last month, the rounds were at 1,830 ahead of the budget, and even 1,623 ahead of last year's record performance year to date. So we are now on schedule to break our record for the number of rounds in a year in our golf sites, even with Tanasi limping along. Excuse me, yeah, Tanasi, that's right. Pickleball. Incredible opening of the new Pickleplex, and I think everybody would agree that that has been a wonderful improvement and a wonderful addition to our community. I would also like to go on record to say that at that meeting, you people cleared out 2 kegs in less than an hour. Just throwing that out there. Also, under the health and welfare, I love using that term, our household memberships are still climbing, and our individual memberships at the club is still climbing. And so even with all the slowdown in homes and that sort of stuff, we are still way over budget in terms of the number of people who are actually participating in our health club. Outside of operations, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is Tanasi update.
Okay, I'm back. What we've done is right now we are still negotiating with the insurance company, and I always have to throw this in here. Everybody, please keep in mind that it is a dogfight to get our money from the insurance. It is their task not to pay us, and it is our task to insist they do. So that's the game that's going on there. We've had our engineer look at the foundation of what was left, and it is his determination that the foundation is most likely usable, and that the fire was up, not down, meaning the fire heated up toward the ceiling and not down toward the concrete. And but we're still in, like I said, we're still in the throes with the insurance company, so we're not sure how that's going to play out at the end of the day. We're also looking at determining the square footage needed. One of the things that everybody's talked about is, well, the parking was terrible at Tanasi. So we're looking at how can we increase the number of car spaces. Well, one of the things that goes along with that is depending on the size building we build, the local state fire department and fire code will require that we have X number of parking lots spaces to compare to X number of people. So there's a balance there that we have to find. And so right now the committee is looking at square footage. As an example, I on a bet could not tell you how much square footage is necessary for a kitchen, but our food staff can. And so they're giving us some specs on the number of square footage for kitchens, for dining area, bar area, outdoor seating area. How many people do we intend to feed? What's that look like in terms of square foot? Also, we're looking at meeting spaces and determining how many people can we put in X square footage, including tables and chairs, that sort of stuff. Pardon me. And then golf is looking at what's the square footage they need. And when we say that, keeping in mind that we're still open to option number 3 or option number 4, or to put it another way for those of you who don't know that term, putting up one building or having 2 separate areas for golf. And that square footage doesn't change regarding that particular need, so we're trying to figure out what that square footage is and that use. And once we get that in place, then we'll begin to look at what our options are in terms of buildings and where we put that building. And there's just a ton of decision processes that are going into this. As an example, regardless of what size building we put in there, we have to remember that we can't put in our sewer system below the 820 line, mostly because of water levels. And so this is just an example of the kinds of things that we're having to determine in that committee and review in that committee. It's not as simple as let's throw up a building. We really have to think through the process of how we get there. And once we do, then we'll begin to look for other input from the community in terms of how that's going to work. Anything else, Mitzi, I should have forgotten?
You didn't forget anything. The only thing I would add is the Tanasi Restoration Committee meets on a weekly basis, and we put those minutes out, and so those minutes are available for you to view at the next week after we've approved those. And so Beth has those on the website, so I just encourage everybody to kind of keep up with those minutes, because we do a lot of decision-making each week that you may not hear about until the next board meeting the next month. So I would encourage you to get on the Tanasi Fire portion of our website and look at all of her updates that she puts out there.
Are those also on the Telegram?
Yeah, they
Yes.
go out in the Telegram as well after.
It's key that you all take the time. One of the things that I always encourage people to do is to take the time to read those minutes. We try and cover a lot in that particular meeting, and we try and make decisions in those meetings. There's very seldom a meeting goes by where a decision is not being made. It's part of pushing the project forward, and so we don't want to waste any more time than we have to.
Sorry, I just thought about, you might give them the update on today and tomorrow, the cart barn going in.
I thought I did. I'll repeat it again, though, in case somebody missed it. The cart barn's going in tomorrow. So, yeah, no, that's, we're making progress, and that will definitely take a load off the golf community to have their carts down there where they belong in the first place, and being able to update them nightly and all those good things. So that's a great step in moving us forward. This committee's task, and my task personally, has been to get us back to being able to maintain golf play in a more normal fashion at Tanasi. Definitely not like it was, but at least where we can move forward and have a good game as we go into next year's golf season. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, any questions, comments for Chet? Seeing none from the board? Roger?
Just one question. You're talking about looking at option 3 and 4. Have you guys looked at the proposal that I've sent to you? Is it getting any discussion? What can you tell me about that?
Yes, so we're continuing to look at what our options are. When I say option 3 and 4, that's all the options that we've put out to the rest of the community. And so yours has been reviewed by myself and as well as other members of the committee. And we're looking at that option and looking at pieces of that option as how they apply.
Okay, yeah, my only concern is, you know, a lot of times committees and people consider things and they get along, and I don't want it to be like, it's too late really, but if you guys are having some conversation, I just don't see anything on the update, so if you're having conversation, that's all I can ask at this point.
Sure, no, it's being reviewed for sure, and we aren't past that point. Yep.
Go ahead, Rick.
Chet, I have a follow-up question on new housing starts. You mentioned 2 of the starts are multi-family. Could you give us, what does that mean? A little more flavor on that?
Beth, you got an answer on that one?
Yeah, I think they're just townhome units. It's not a new complex or anything. It's just 2 individual townhome units being increased.
And where are they being constructed?
Kahiti, yeah, they're in existing areas with townhomes, and they're just 2 additional units. So these are not new developments.
Sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Okay, with that, let's move on. Next topic is sewer projects from Clayton.
So the board had asked me to give an update on, back a few months ago, I had asked the board to give me permission to work with our engineering group to establish what we needed to do to move forward with updating our sewer system. We have issues mainly with getting our sewer out of here, but so we wanted to do a holding tank. So we got an engineering firm to come in and do a complete evaluation of our sewer lift station and building a sewer holding tank. There was 3 alternatives. One was just pumping the sewer straight into a holding tank. The second one was building a new lift station and a holding tank, and 3 was building a holding tank and refurbing our existing 35-plus-year-old holding tank. So we have a huge detailed list of advantages and disadvantages of each one of those. But when PSAC, which our Public Service Advisory Committee is very knowledgeable in water and sewer operations, we're blessed to have that group of guys. So they reviewed these plans, the advantages and disadvantages of each one, and some of the main things they looked at was service interruption to property owners and overall cost. They looked at what could be hidden cost, and you know, when you go to remodeling, rehabbing something, you're looking at 35-year-old concrete and the stress that it's been through. If you know anything about our sewer lift station, when that main lift station was built, it was designed to have grinder pumps put in there, different kind of pumps, and it has been kind of retrofitted to the pumps that we have in there now. So after the PSAC committee reviewing this, they made a recommendation that we move forward with doing the holding tank and the new sewer lift station, because there's a lot of cost in there to rehabbing. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in there to bypass pumps and getting rid of sewer and all this stuff that we really gain nothing from. So we were looking at what we would get for our money, the best option for our money. And there's a lot of concern that we could get into the rehab, and the rehab end up costing more than the whole new lift station would cost. So with the support of the Public Service Advisory Committee, we make a recommendation to move forward with this project. We want to put that in our budget, and you know, we'll start phasing it in. We'll start engineering and doing those things that we need to. We will, you know, everything will come back before the board, and we'd just like to move forward with that. So.
Yeah, so just to clarify, basically, you will be coming back with that list that you just mentioned, the pros and cons of each options, the total cost,
Yes,
of
and I
ownership
have
for
that
both?
list. I can email all that to y'all.
Yeah, I would recommend that we have that, when, you know, when you're, maybe next board meeting,
Sure.
whatever, but actually have slides that we can show everybody else too. What are those options we're considering and why we're going the way that PSAC and you recommend?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Clayton?
Just an add-on, that the total life cycle cost will be displayed for both refurbishment and brand new.
Yes, that is being worked on right now.
Yes, sir.
Quick question.
And so, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, Roger. Yeah, and so what do you think the timeline looks like then on that, depending on when it gets approved?
Well, we got some money in the budget for next year for engineering design, getting started, you know, doing all that stuff. But I'm figuring we'll be into 25 before that project would be completed,
Okay, so start
in 23, so.
And this is also the project that we're working to get funding from the state.
Yes, sir, with a TDEC grant.
2.1 million.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now you can go.
So what is your plan for the old pumps, lift stations, and storage? Did they have any life expectancy left in them, or what's your plan for the reusing perhaps rather than recycling?
Well, we will keep the pumps because those pumps can possibly be used as future down the road when we need to change some pump sizes out at Tokewell or Tanasi or somewhere, so we would keep those pumps. And the lift station, as far as storage, there's just wet wells there, so that's just concrete and all that piping and stuff. That would be removed. It's just old, outdated. It's not any good for anything. So when their new lift station would go online, that old one would be removed.
And the holding tank is completely new. That's
Ye-
something that is not part of our infrastructure today.
Correct.
Yes, just want to be clear on that.
Clayton, can you tell where the tank's going to be located, the new tank?
If you look where where the main lift station is now, to the left side of it, there is a brown building with a bypass pump in there. Immediately to the left, it would go that way into that wood area. Good. That's good. If you don't know where it's at, then you won't be looking for it, and you won't realize that there's a tank there. So don't tell them, Pat. Yes, if you go to the end of Sequoia Road and you're sitting at the intersection of Sequoia Road and 444, there's a little paved road that turns out behind the entrance garden there, down off the hill. So it's down below Highway 444, down in that area.
Is when you turn into the yacht club,
Yes.
the road that the yacht club's on, entrance road.
Okay, any more questions for Clayton? All right, thanks, Clayton. You also have the next topic, trash service.
So, as you all know, we had sent Republic a termination letter, and Republic has agreed to continue to pick up trash until the end of January, to where we can get someone else on board. We sent out RFQs to 6 different trash services. We got bids back on 3. Trash, as I think Chet mentioned, none of those really want to do residential at-home recycling. The cost is just enormous to do that, but we are looking at, if we move forward with this company, we would, in certain locations, we would put recycling bins, is what we're looking at, to where if you got, which we need to understand, number one, cardboard, number one, plastic, metal cans and aluminum cans is all that is being recycled right now. So there is, if we decide to move forward with it, there will be some locations that if you do want to recycle, you can drop those off.
There we go. So could you do us a favor? Let me back up. From my understanding, the bids that you got back were not promoting recycling at all.
Correct.
One of them said we can, but the additional cost would be. Could you explain that one?
The cost for residential trash would double if they done recycling.
No,
So-
I understand double, but $1 to $2 is no big deal.
No, okay, so you want price it?
Yeah,
So-
the monthly fee for
Yeah.
just trash pickup from
For-
this one company was,
Yes, for the one company was $25 a month, which would be 75 a quarter.
and then
To
recycling
do
for every
recycling,
home.
it would go to 50 a month,
Fi-
which would be 150,
And that's compared to what that we're paying today?
14 and some change today. Yes,
So
sir.
we're still looking at a roughly $9 increase just per month, just for trash pickup.
Yes,
And the truth of the matter is, as we talked about at one time, is that even though a lot of these companies pick up recycling, it may end up in the trash, it likely ends up in the trash pile anyway.
yes, sir.
Well, then now go back to the other part about the company, and this will be part of the negotiation, which we won't get into here today, I hope. But the companies are also saying that they can put dumpster bins, some type of recycling holding.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. They said that wherever we decide, they would do 3 or 4 or 5 bins to collect aluminum cans, aluminum cans, cardboard, which we have cardboard recycling at Public Works. We have aluminum can recycling at Public Works, but they can put an option for us to collect plastics and metal cans at locations of our choice. So that's something we're discussing with them too.
So that means people would have to bring their own to wherever these central locations are.
Yes, sir, if they choose to
Right.
recycle.
And you've yet to receive a cost to the POA to do so.
Yes, at this time, yes, but we will go into negotiation on that.
So before we, and this is from my perspective, I'll need to see what the added charge is for those central locations for recycling. Because what that tells me is the individual property owner will be paying for that through their normal assessment versus through a trash pickup service fee.
Correct.
Right. So I need to know how big that is, because
Yeah.
that's going to have to be, that's another subsidy.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Clayton? Anybody? Okay, thank you.
To the sewer tank. They want to know how near the water or lake it would be, and will there be an EPA study?
Yes, everything will have to have studies done. Everything's got to be approved through TDEC. The tank would not set any lower than, I think we established a grade at 824. So, that will be top of the ground. So it will not be in the ground, so there'll be a foundation, a footing in there, but 824 would be the lowest.
Okay, thanks, Clayton. Next item is October finance review. Jessica.
Okay. So assessed lots through October were at 6,871. We've had 788 property transfers this year. POA lots sold is 153, and our suspended accounts are at 116.
Jessica, before you go on,
Yes.
you may want to highlight that 116 is the lowest number we've had in 5 years.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes. So our net income through October is 4.6 million, which is 970,000 better than budget. Revenue for all of the divisions is at 25.6 versus prior year of 22.4, and which means it's 1.4 million better than budget. Our expenses are at 21 million versus prior year at 17, and versus a budget of 23 million. We are 2.2 million under budget through October.
So is that timing? I mean, are we expecting to spend that money?
Some of it, yes, and some of it will not occur before the end of the year.
So does that mean it gets pushed into next year? I know it's probably not the question for you, but. So of the we got 2.2 million underspend in expenses year-to-date. And my question was, how much of that was timing and how much of that will actually go into next year if we didn't get to it this year?
Don't have a total about what wasn't spent, but anything that's obviously in those funds is going to be swept into the reserves.
I guess I have a different take on that question. When we did the budget last year, we had a number of projects that we projected would happen. And they were basically things that we needed to do. So my question would be, of the $2.2 million, how much of those projects will not be done, and are they still needed?
Where's Clay?
And some,
Sorry.
so, that's fine. Some of the projects, for people that have been a part of the budget meetings and everything else, we did have budgeted repaving on our tennis courts. I believe we all know that that's not going to be able to happen this year, so that is in next year's budget. And so anything that we were not able to accomplish, hopefully, all of the managers got everything in the budget for next year. But Clayton can answer his part.
So, a lot of the public works money falls in from pavement preservation. If y'all remember, early in the year, I came to y'all and told y'all that our roads were taking a beating, and instead of, sealing a bunch of the roads, we wanted to resurface roads. So we had some streets that we needed to resurface, which is ongoing. And then we had the Chota Road project come up, which was an unbudgeted project, but what we tried to do is watch what we were doing with the pavement preservation money and the paving to where we can take and absorb most of that unbudgeted money for that Chota Road project instead of it being all unbudgeted money. So our goal is to make sure out of our budget we had enough to cover that project. So we're going to be pretty close to where we're not spending unbudgeted money on that Chota Road project. Does that make sense?
Again, I guess I go back. What did we have that we planned last year that isn't happening now?
The only thing that we're not doing was we were going to seal the roads in Tokwa area.
Okay.
And we have that in the budget to make that up next year.
So that accounts for $1.1 million in public works.
So,
right?
yes, that's roughly, yes.
Of that 1.1, is any of it going to be savings because it's not needed anymore?
Yeah, we're not asking to carry it over.
Okay.
So.
That's the question I had.
Jessica, a couple questions. If we go back to the revenue slide. Under Public Works, I'm assuming the revenue includes water and sewer?
It's water and sewer and utility tank installations.
Okay, so then I come back down to your expense slide. Does that include your cost of goods sold for water and sewer in the expense, or is that truly expense to run?
That does include the cost of goods
It
sold.
does include?
Yes.
Thank you.
For general operations, our revenue was 12 million year-to-date versus a budget of 11.8, and our expenses is 3.7 versus a budget of 4.5. Golf operations, their revenue is at 3.6 million versus prior year at 3.3 and versus budget of 3.1. Their expenses are at 4.3 million versus a budget of 4.6 with a $339,000 savings.
Jessica, tell me what's in the 160,000 general expense.
Give me just a second, I have it here somewhere. Or,
Under golf.
okay, that's okay. So that is some of our insurance reimbursements for the cart barn that is being installed over the next few days. The insurance has paid us in full, while we have only paid a deposit down. But you will see that, go away as we do pay the final payment on that building.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Recreation revenue is $904,000 versus a budget of $748,000. Their expenses are at 1.5 versus a budget of 1.6 with $104,000 in savings. Public Works revenue is $7.2 million versus a budget of 6.9, and their expenses are at $9 million versus a budget of 10.1. This is the public safety. The numbers are right in line with the budget. Food service revenue for Kahiti Grill is $537,000 versus a budget of $465,000, which is $72,000 better than budget. The expenses for food service operations are at $1.1 million versus a budget of $1.1. So we are over budget in that department by $29,000. Dock and RV, the revenue is at $1.1 million versus a budget revenue of $973,000. And expenses are $919,000 versus a budget of $781,000.
We have a question online before you move forward. What is including in the banking expense?
Banking expense is going to be, for all of our departments, will be the credit card fees that our credit card processors charge us. It's banking fees also that our bank accounts charges us service charges. And it can be interest expense on debt. Commercial, total revenue is $158,000 versus a budget of $152,000. Expenses are at $172,000 versus a budget of $120,000. And banking expense, I probably should have said this back at general operations, but through the budgeting process, we reviewed the CCI loan acquisition and where the interest was being expensed. 100% of the interest was being expensed to the commercial department, and we decided to break that interest up, and with only the portion for the building, for the Village Square building, being coded to the commercial department, and the rest would be going to administrative. So the breakdown of that is 53% of the interest will be booked to to administrative going forward, and 47% of that will now be booked to commercial. So that is what you're seeing in the difference in banking expense, the reduction in that. Rec memberships, for the year, household is at 1,206, and individual is 652. So we will move to our funding request. The first one is the elevator here at the Yacht Club. This project will be completed in 2023. It was budgeted, we have it as part of the 2023 budget. we had it in the budget as 172,500, and we are requesting 162,200. The funds of that would come from the R&M reserve. And we did put out a bid and received 2 back. And the elevator is 30 years old, and it truly needs to be replaced. It's a safety concern. And so what we would like to do is go ahead and have approval to move forward. The project will not be completed until 2023. We're hoping sometime in February. But we would like to go ahead and get everything started on this project now.
So is this actually a 2023 capital funding request then?
That's correct.
You just want to
Yes.
get moving on it now?
Yes,
We would have to pay a percentage to get it ordered.
yes, to go ahead and.
20%, I believe it's 20%.
So 20% would come out of this year.
Yes.
Yes.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded to approve the request for $162,200 to fund a new elevator at the Yacht Club coming out of R&M Reserve. Any questions, comments?
So this is, I keep forgetting, this is also an ADA compliance issue as well, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, I was going to ask
Meaning
either
that we
Clayton
have-
or Chet, give some background on the need for a new versus just keep fixing what we have.
Well, it's kind of like that car you buy and you keep spending thousands of dollars on it every year to keep it going, and pretty soon you realize you'd bought the car after 5 years again. And so the same thing goes with the elevator. We've been repairing it for some time, but there's a greater issue, and that is we have many people in this community who have to access the yacht club either by wheelchair or by walker, and the elevator becomes their only method of going up, and more importantly, their only method of coming back down,
Including using of restroom facilities.
including using the restroom facilities. Therefore, we have to have some access for them, and when it is broken down, it presents a problem that we really don't have a lot of ways around. In the case of emergencies, we do have a second elevator that we could run people through the kitchen. It's in the kitchen, and it's a freight elevator, for lack of a better word, but it would put them out downstairs at the loading dock, not at the front gate. And so that's another problem that we would have to deal with. So the reality of it is to be compliant, but more than that, and I hate using these kind of terms, because the bottom line is we should be wanting to take care of our community in a way that is appropriate. And whether it was an ADA compliant or not, as far as I'm concerned, we needed to move ahead with this project to be able to allow people to access the yacht club safely on each floor and with the use of the elevator.
And if I may, just to put into perspective, this actually involves a new controller, power unit, motor, pump, tank, and valve, 2 door operators, fixtures, car operating panels, 6 hall stations, 6 hall lanterns, 2 car doors, car entrances and returns, rear and front, because if you know here how the yacht club elevator works, you've got doors that open on both sides, depending on which floor you're on. The walls, ceiling, wiring, hydraulic oil, replace the leaking jack seal, and this does include a 12-month warranty on the service. So just to kind of put it into perspective, it basically is rebuilding the entire elevator.
The only thing we're not buying new is the box.
Any other discussion? Seeing,
One point, Clayton, what's the schedule for this to happen, and how will it impact the community?
Well, we can't give you a schedule at this time. We got to order parts and see how long it will take them to get parts in. There's bits and pieces, so he said it could be 3 months before all the parts comes in. So when everything comes in, we'll just have to schedule time, work with, the yacht club staff, see when is the best time to do that, and get it out to the community in the telegram and everything else, letting them know this is what's going on.
So during that period of time, there will be no elevator access.
Correct. Well, not during the entire time. So at certain points, they will be here, and if there's an emergency, they can kick it on and use it.
Okay.
So,
and we could probably use the kitchen
yes, sir.
elevator.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you should only use that in an emergency.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
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 And you still have issues of stairs along the way, yeah. The bottom line is that the elevator, there is only really a small period of time where the box is completely down, and that's when they're replacing the pump itself and the actuators to be able to open doors and lift the elevator up and down. Once that's in place and installed, it may be an ugly ride, but you'll be able to use it.
John, did you have a question?
Just a clarification,
You can use the mic. That's why I was trying to get you over there.
more procedurally, but it says that PSAC recommended this. We hadn't seen this yet, so just so you know. I'm sure it's needed, it's an urgent request, but that's not accurate, that Public Services recommended it.
Okay, thank you.
You probably looked at this, but what is the difference in terms of installation time and cost versus a completely new elevator?
It is pretty much new. In fact, the elevator company would come to you and say, there's no point in you buying another box of steel. It's just a box of steel. Everything else, the guts of it, the lights, the wiring, everything else is being replaced. So it would be a waste of money, for lack of a better way of putting it, to go out and buy another box that's just the same.
So that's the only thing that's different, is just the
Yeah.
box.
Yeah, pretty much.
Can I ask real quick that you have speakers at the microphone identify themselves, who they are, if they have a position?
Who are you? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Bob Denny.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of moving forward as in the motion, please raise your right hand. 7-0.
Marty, just something on that proposal. Well, I believe we have to move quickly. I'd like to have Chet find out and get into why we're saying things are approved by PSAC when in fact it has not.
And I was completely aware that PSAC had never seen that. I'm not sure why that's in that slide.
Okay, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, Jessica.
The next project is within Chet's level of approval authority, so it's an informational piece. It's for Tanasi Golf Maintenance, and they are going to purchase a Toro GM 3300 mower. And so this is a demo unit with 536 hours, and the budgeted amount was $36,000, and the price of the mower is $35,614. Forward.
Okay.
And the next project is the temporary pro shop. I don't know, Mitzi, do you want to speak to this, or as part of the Tanasi Fire? Oh, yes.
Come on down.
All right, we've been through this a couple times, and the board's already seen all this, obviously, and it's in process. But we went through a lengthy discovery process and trying to come up with the best bridge solution for a temporary, short-term, long-term. It's probably a 2-year deal where we're trying to find something to have a just a short-term, long-term solution for our Tanasi clubhouse, golf clubhouse. So what we landed on as the best solution is this modular setup, and we're still going back and forth working with Clayton on finalizing all the details, but we feel confident the 300 number is going to be a satisfactory budget. We think we'll come in under that, but we can't say exactly what that number is going to be until we finalize the plan. So we're going back and forth, and we're pretty close I had another conversation with those folks today, and they're going to have a team meeting at the manufacturing plant, which is in Dandridge, on Tuesday, and circle back, and we'll have some final information to pass along at that point in time. So this is just some concepts with respect to the floor plan, how it would be situated, and it'll be similar to what we experienced in 2019 at Tokwa when we were under construction there. So the beauty of this facility versus the renting options is we'll have something to show for it. So we'll have a building that we can repurpose, we can move, or resell. We're hoping that insurance will pay for the building or or part of the building. But regardless, we'll have an asset that we can repurpose, reuse, relocate, or resell. So obviously, it's the best use of our funds. So each of these bridge solutions, the cart barn is going in now. If you want to go to the WATE and look at their weather feed, weather camera, you can watch them as they're erecting the temporary cart barn as we speak. So that's another approach that we took, where we have a cart barn that we've paid for through the insurance proceeds that we can repurpose down the road, cut into pieces, use at public works, using golf maintenance. So we're trying to be as responsible as we possibly can when we pursue all these different bridge options and make the most responsible decision we can on behalf of the POA, and put golf in a position where we can have something that resembles the former golf experience at Tanasi.
Perfect. So for all you savvy this is Chet, for all you savvy homeowners who are thinking, but wait, didn't we have a double wide at Tokwa that we used and put over in the Public Works area? The truth is we did, and we were intending to use that building until we opened it up and found out that it was eaten up with black mold in the walls and in the ceiling, and so we are burning that building down. Regrettably, not being, well, I'm exaggerating, we aren't burning it down, we're tearing it down and throwing it away. But anyway, that's the reason why we're not. It was indeed our intent until we investigated the building, and it's no longer inhabitable. So we've had to go to this route. I also wanted to point out, and Mitzi, correct me if I go down a road that isn't true here, but it's my understanding that the cart barn was paid as an additional fee beyond the actual building fees that we will be getting for the value of the building. Yeah, the cart barn is not, if you're thinking, well, we've now reduced what monies we're getting back for the building itself because we're putting in a cart barn, we are not. It is an additional fee that they are willing to pay.
Business resumption.
Yeah, business resumption fee, I guess is the right term.
And Chris, the hopes are that the insurance company will cover this in order to reduce the business continuity fees they're paying us, number one. And if they do pay for it, then they'll own it at the end. So their option is either to sell it as used back to us or take it and sell it someplace else, correct?
That would be their option.
That's the hope.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Is that it? Thanks, Jessica. All right, next item on the agenda is the budget. Mickey, you're leading us through that, right?
I've got a couple of slides to go through, so I'll probably stay here. Excuse me. Mickey White, the Chief Financial Officer, for about a month now. I'm glad that I'm here, and I appreciate so much help that I've received through this budgeting process. There's been a lot to learn. There are some great members of your advisory committees as well as the board who have breathed on all of these numbers and modified and enhanced and provided much more detail. And so I think this finished product is very good. So there's a few strategic initiatives that Chet has identified. The Tanasi rebuild obviously is the primary one, and that's going to take a few years to get going. There's a Kahiti kitchen remodel that's been in the conversations for a couple of years, and so now the plan is to get that into this 2023 year. The accounting software that we currently are using is very old. It's an AS400, so we're looking to replace that with some customized systems that will give us some better service, as well as hopefully create a better experience for anybody that wants to be able to log in through some dashboards that we'll try to create. And lastly, obviously, the elevator here at the Yacht Club. This is a graph of some of the trends over the time starting from 2020. And you can see the, excuse me, the revenues, the total expenses, excluding depreciation, and finally that available at the end of each of those years that could go into the reserve funds. And so there's been some increases. The expenses you'll see we've been pretty good about holding those flat, which is increasing the amount of funds that are going to go into your reserves. Number of lots gives you a little bit of a history from 2019. The numbers for 22, we expect to end up with 132 at the end of this year with some foreclosures and again some lot sales going into 2023. We included this slide just to be able to let everybody see what the debt is of the POA and a little bit of a timeline as to when it was brought into place. So we can see that at the end of this year, we'll end up with about $4.6 million of true debt. There's a couple of lease obligations that are treated as liabilities, and so we've included those in that bottom section. And there, at the right, you'll see there's an anticipated reduction over the next couple of years. And finally, there's a maturity date on each of those notes. So there's a couple there that have some dates that we'll have to go in and look to refinance and renew some of those notes. As we built the budgets, and again, as any budget season, you toss out some information to each of the managers in the departments, ask them to start at a point of 5% on an increase on revenues. The assessments, we were looking at both a 5 and a 9.1% increase, which is the CPI index for the last 12 months. Asked them to hold the expenses between 3 and 5%. We later went back to each of the managers and asked them to squeeze out as much as they could, so there's been some extra efforts to try to minimize some of that. We looked at the volume increases, and again, each of the managers know their businesses, and they've been able to provide some of that. The head counts, there's a couple of slides in here. We've shown some histories, and where the numbers are, there's a few positions that have been added, and we can talk about those as we get into it within the Public Works. But either we were filling open positions or we were adding those 6 that were noted there. The HR department went through and provided this information so we could see approximately where some of the wages and analysis were. And there to the right, we looked at some histories about the head counts and the changes that were there. And you can see there's not a lot of change. These next 2 slides, I realize you probably can't see those on the screen, but it's a depiction of where we were at the end of each period based on the payrolls that were run. And so on the printed pages, you might be able to see a little bit better, but there has been a lot of change over time. There have been some increases in some part-time or seasonal staffing at the golf courses, and there's been some increases on the number of individuals that are teaching the exercise classes at the Parks and Recs group, but they're paid on an individual class level, so they're very part-time in that nature.
Mickey, before you go on.
Yep.
We probably ought to let the property owners know about the wages that we pay. If you remember, you weren't here, but about 2 months ago, we had a presentation on our sewer staff level, which had 10 individuals. I believe we were having a 60 to 68% turnover. Wage study was done. We were paying $15 an hour. Russell came up with the data. The competitors in town, which would be other public works facilities, were paying $22. The board made the decision to support the recommendation to raise our base wage to $22 an hour.
Why?
Because we were losing 68% turnover.
So in other words, we were certifying, licensing, training, going through pre-senior periods, getting them acclimated, and as soon as we did,
they were gone. So part of the reason you see these wage increases is market-driven. Our turnovers have been totally unacceptable in this organization.
This is Chet. One of the reasons that this is key is because I think I often use the phrase that it is easier to fix an employee than it is to fire them. And even though that sounds clever, there's actually finances and dollars and cents behind that. Every employee that you have to let go and bring a new employee in, on average, you lose between 5 and 6 paychecks. So think about 68% just being flushed down the toilet every time we have that turnover. And so it's really important that one of our tasks, and one of the tasks that I've given to the staff, is that it's all of ours, including myself, responsibility to maintain the staff we have and to see what the issues are and try and address those at the gate so that we don't lose those people. Number one, it's the right thing to do as a good employer, but number two, it's saving us money. And it's a significant amount of money if you do the math on that 5 to 6 paychecks every time you have to turn somebody over.
Sorry.
So this slide is a consolidated view with some of the history from 2020 up through the months where we have 21, the budget, and then a projection for our 2022 numbers. And then we've gone in with these increases, and that yellow highlighted is a straight 5% over the assessments. And then there's an additional column there to the right of that with a 9.1 increase just in the assessment fees. So we can see what the total revenue numbers there, the gross profit salaries were at 7.9. Benefits were at 27% of what the salaries were. So we had a very good year on our health insurance. And so the premiums that we're going to be paying actually went down by just a small amount, which is kind of an unheard of thing. So we're able to keep those ratios in line. Each of the expenses are there, and I'll allow you to browse through them. We end up with a net surplus of $5 million for 2023 at a 5% assessment. If we were to approve the 9.1%, it generates an additional $524,000 for $5.5 million at that surplus. So we're trying to look at operating budgets a little bit differently going forward, where anything that's of an operational nature, less than 10,000 unusual purchases will go into the operational budgets. Anything that's of a material or recurring or capital nature will go through our reserve budget, and we'll go through some of those in just a minute. So this is our attempt to say, what does it take to do just the operational side of the POA? And with that, after this net surplus number, there's an available for reserve subsidy, and that is adding back the depreciation numbers that are shown there. So after all of the expenditures and the revenues that are calculating and adding back the depreciation, we have $7 million that we anticipate being generated from the budget that could go into reserves at that 5% increase. And with the additional $524,000 for the 9.1 on the assessment, it brings it to 7.5, almost 7.6 million. Below that is a quick summary of what we have anticipation for spending. 5.2 million on capital and 2.6 million on maintenance, for a total of 7.9 million. So it's comparable to the net surplus that's going to be generated through the operating budget, though it is slightly over that by 333,000.
One more time, Mickey, if you go back that slide.
Yep.
What happens to your subsidy in the 5% is your reserves go down almost 900,000 at the 5%, and the reserves still deplete by 300,000 under the 9.1.
Correct.
So one other question, Mickey. So if you would, down under reserve spending, you've got maintenance, the 2.67 million. Can you explain how that ties to maintenance up above in your operating expenses?
Any of the maintenance expenses that are listed in the operating are going to be of smaller expenditure natures. They're going to be less than, again, we tried to establish a baseline of anything below 10,000 and a non-recurring nature would hit this operating budget and be paid through the operational side of it. Anything above 10,000, reserved for the sewer, water, sewer, roads, just about any of the equipment that has to be replaced or refurbished would run through and be a part of that maintenance item there.
So we're looking at, so by adding those two together, we're looking at 5.7 million in maintenance expense next year.
In total, correct?
Yeah, right, in total.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Maintenance costs.
yeah, so to give you a more tangible and simplistic example, to replace all the light bulbs in this room would be operational. To replace all the lights and the light fixtures in this room would be a reserve.
All right, thank you.
The schedule shows the surplus or subsidy by each division. That's that first column. Administrative and commercial and docks are generating a positive cash flow, while each of the others have some element of a subsidy that's required to be paid through the assessment fees. Capital and maintenance expenditures says that at a 5%, this is again a recap of that column, 858,000 shortfall, and at the 9.1%, the revenue numbers, with the exception of the assessment, stays the same. That net surplus or subsidy is 333,000, meaning we're spending more than we are taking in this year on our capital. This is a 9-year projection. Apologize, it should be a 10-year, but our numbers were cut off, and so we're going to go with 9 years. So we anticipate 16.6 million to be the carryover balance in all of the reserve funds. The 7.596 is at that 9.1 contribution number that we just talked about. We hope that we're going to get some additional insurance proceeds from Tanasi Fire. We're looking at, it was mentioned earlier, the TDEC grant. It's 2.1 million, and if it's approved, we'll get it sometime either in 24 or 25. And then we have some expected earnings on these funds at that earnings rate you see at the very top at 3%, a little bit declining over time. We hope we can do better than that, but for this purposes, we assume that we would generate 3% over this times. So it gives us some available funds. Then we have the use of funds, the 7.9 million. We have the large sewer projects that's happening in 24 and 25. And you can see those out periods, it's fairly close and fairly consistent. We're going to project about an $8 to $9 million of reserve expenditures each year. After that, you see that we end up with a reserve balance of 19.2 million at the end of this year. And it'll go up or down depending on the excess of funds that we're spending over the next several years, out to 2031, where we're projecting to have 26 million. Any questions about the consolidated numbers or in total? We've got some individual slides that we can go through the divisional schedules, but that's in total. And we'll be asking the board to vote on the summary of what we've just shown.
Okay, so first, Don, before you go, does anybody on the board have any questions or comments of Mickey? Okay, Don?
My name is Don Hart, and I'm running for a position on the board. I'm a golfer. If the POA, if the budget were to take out the amount that is covered for golfers, for golf, okay, how would that increase it for what golfers would have to pay?
Is that including capital and what you're, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what you're asking.
Well, you have a budget item in there that's supplemental for golf. Okay? If you were to take that out, how much would that increase it for those who play golf?
Are you asking if we eliminated the subsidy in golf, what would the effect be on the greens fees?
Correct. Thank
Okay.
you.
Chris, is that number of rounds this year, 95,000? 96,000. All right, I'll have it for you in a minute.
So on this slide,
It'll be another $13 a round.
$13 a
If
round?
all those were paying rounds, but you got to realize a great percentage of those rounds are annual memberships. So you'd have to also raise your annual membership. I think the break even is 82 rounds or something for an annual membership. So that'd be another $13 times 82 rounds for an annual membership.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I'm Dominic Andriana. My question is, the contribution to reserves this year of $7.5 million, is that fully funded as proposed by the engineers? In other words, they said how much we should put away each year. What does the $7.5 million represent compared to that study?
I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but I know that they were proposing that the amounts that we would contribute each year would be higher than what we currently have.
8 million, I think, is the target.
8
Correct.
million was the target, 8 million and change.
It's just short of fully funding.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Rick Carlin, I have two sidebar questions. Number one, on the CCI purchase, that did not include 9.99 acres in Mealacqua. Is there any, can you tell us the status on that?
That is still owned by the developer, by CCI, the previous developer.
Does the POA see any advantage in purchasing, or are they just going to leave it with CCI?
At this time, we have a first right of refusal on it, but that hasn't been brought to us.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your answer there, Beth? I didn't hear.
At this time, we have a first right of refusal on that piece of property, but that has not been brought to us, so they are still retaining the ownership of that. They might plan to do their own development with it. We don't know. We haven't heard back on it.
During the CCI purchase, it was our impression that it wasn't worth nearly what they were asking for it, and we couldn't come to agreement, so that's why it was left out.
Well, I hear you, and that makes sense, Marty. I just can't see CCI as a business entity having only that 10 acres in the whole state of Tennessee. It just, from a business point of view, it doesn't make sense. I would kind of hope at some point that CCI and the POA could come to some agreement at some price to purchase it, because that seems to be a piece of land that could be put together for valuable use for property owners. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Number two.
Well, let me just comment to that. When we negotiated the deal with CCI, we did a lot of test boring on that site. And frankly, we backed away from it, number one, because they wanted over $1 million for it. And by the way, they wouldn't come down. And, oh, by the way, we felt that it might be dangerous to build on it.
Because?
Because it's got a lot of sinkholes.
Okay.
It's like, sinkhole heaven. Yeah.
Okay. Number two, the Republic or garbage contract. So just looking quickly at the numbers, a potential new company that would just do garbage only would be a 40% increase over what we're paying now. A company that would do the complete package as Republic is doing now would be a little more than triple. All right, so just thinking of the numbers, does it make any sense for the board to maybe take a really deep breath and step back and have further negotiations with Republic and continue the arrangement with them, given whatever quirky service they provide occasionally? That's it.
So my understanding, Clayton, could you give us the Republic number, because they did make an offer?
Yeah, it's pretty high.
Wait a second.
That is dead. So as of January 31st, Republic Trash Services would no longer continue to do the top service that they are doing now. They will not continue to do recycle if we chose to go with them. I sent an RFQ out to them also. They come back at $75 a quarter just for trash service. that's-
So, Rick, you have faith that they're gonna do what they're gonna do for triple the price? I don't. Yeah, there you go, Rick.
Hey, you may want to stay down. Hi, I'm Gary Bush. I happen to be involved with the solid waste side on the county. I've gotten involved, I've been here a year, a little more than a year. I've got a couple, pardon me?
Can you speak up, please?
Yeah, okay. I've been in the village for about a little more than a year today. So my question on the solid, as far as the waste pickup, I know you're quoting it and bidding it and everything. And if currently you've gone out to the providers, that you said 6 providers and that, and they've come back with the split response. So on the side of the recycling, okay, have you gone back out to recycle companies who will drop containers in the locations if we have a program with them and turn it into a cash revenue that's net neutral to Tellico Village? Because aluminum, cardboard, steel, all those areas, those are cash generators. So has that been looked at? Because they will also foot the bill to put that stuff into the village if we want them to do that on a location. So compactor, drop-offs with compactors on it to compact your aluminum, compact the cardboard, compact your paper. That would entice the community to put more recyclables into it because it would generate versus going into landfill. Secondly, on the landfill side or the garbage disposal, my question would be on the contracts and the negotiations is, did we limit where they can dispose that waste? The last contract was limited to going to the Loudon landfill. Loudon landfill rates are going up significantly on the tipping fees. Are they limited, or can they haul it into the Blount County or other places where the tipping fees may be less?
The answer to your last question is we told them we didn't care where they take it. We didn't want to limit it them because when you limit a company could drive up price. So no, we did not, restrict where they could take that. So that was open. As far as the recycle drops in various locations, that is something that every company I talk to were able to do, and we are negotiating with them. Now, they only accept 4 different types. There's only 4 things that they recycle. That's number 1, cardboard, number 1, plastic, aluminum cans, and metal cans. And that's what we're looking at. That's what we're talking to, because they all say there is no market on that, so we're discussing cost and stuff like that. So if we move forward, there could be a possibility that we'll have those containers spread out throughout the village in various locations. Yes, we do currently have aluminum can recycling at Public Works. We have cardboard recycling and e-recycling at Public Works.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, hi, Bob Denny. When we were back discussing a week ago the reserves, there was discussion that I heard about creating or recreating the amenity reserves. I haven't seen anything about that. Did I miss it? Is it not going to happen? I'm sorry? Okay. I'm hanging on.
Please hold.
Oh, it's
We'll get
coming.
there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, where do we go from here, Mickey?
So, through this process, we've had each of the divisional managers present. I will try to speak for them, and I'll allow them to chime in and add to the conversations if they'd like. So Tellico Golf, everybody understands the value and the experience that's there. There's been a lot of good things that have happened, a lot of record-setting rounds that have been sold through the course of these last year. some of the golf rates that are going to change 5%, which is in line with some of the other regions. Daily golf guest rates go up by a minimum of 8%. Daily range from 6 to 7. You can see some of the other mix and the other numbers that are related to those things. Most of that, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, are pretty close into keeping with the other groups and around the area and trying to be competitive. You see the changes in the number of rounds. 96,000 is projected for 2023. They used these numbers to build some of their budget information. It's their estimates of what it's been costing them as an increase on some of the inflation rates. These are the number of rounds that are forecasted going in from 2022. Some additional information there about the number of rounds. So this is the rounds mixed, and you can see as the different types that are going through there and the allocations of what's there at each of the 3 golf courses. This schedule was put in to show the relationship between weather and number of rounds. So the blue columns are the number of rounds, and so if you have good weather, and which has been the case over these last several years, you see the spike in the number of rounds that have happened there. This schedule is a quick summary of the daily fee structure as to where it's been from 2020 and where it's predicted into 2023. Slight changes, pretty close within that 5%. There aren't too many unusual numbers there. Same structure for the twilight daily fees. Membership structure and some of the trend, some of the unlimited fees and the membership and the carts and the schedules there. Again, nothing unusual as far as the increases, pretty close to where some of them have been in the past.
So Mickey, just as a clarification, I believe the guest rates are going up closer to 8%, correct? As opposed to the member rates are more like 5%. Yes, sir. Thank you.
So with those changes, we predict $4.2 million in revenue for golf. Salaries, again, have gone up in the past, but we're going to try to hold those as close as we can going into 2023. There's been some increases in wages. And again, keeping the benefit percentages in line thanks to our health insurance cost. There's been quite a bit of inflation that's pushed through on some of the maintenance and some of the operating supplies. The net result is that they've got a net deficit of $1.4 million. Adding back the depreciation of $621,000 means that they end up with a net subsidy requirement of $845,000. They're anticipating spending $411,000 in the way of capital for a net deficit from a golf perspective of $1.25 million. This schedule is done just to let you see a little bit of what the average rates year over year and what the net changes were, how many rounds which generated the golf revenue, and then the merchandise, advertising, and driving range revenue that were generated over time. This is a quick summary of their $411,000 in capital expenditures that they anticipate for 2023.
And again, these were whittled down to the absolute must-haves.
Correct. Each of the managers was asked to go back, excuse me, and only drive those numbers that really were of a necessity for 2023. With the understanding that we've got some decisions to be made on Tanasi and the sewer, which is going to utilize most of the funding reserves that we're going to be making. And so when available, they moved anything out either to 24 or future periods, and so we'll evaluate those periods as they come up. But they deserve some kudos because they really did work hard to try to whittle some of these numbers down. Any comments, Chris, you want to add to that? It's a good year. Again, the number of rounds, what they've been trying to do there have been exceptional. Any questions or comments about the golf?
I just have two quick ones. I noticed when they went through the budget presentation last week, for the Wellness Center, for example, it was benchmarked against several other local gyms and health facilities. I was wondering, is that typically done for golf? What's not included? So I'm just curious, what is that cost comparison between what guys here pay and what somebody would pay if they went to Avalon or somewhere else?
Yeah. Chris, I'll let you speak to that if you don't mind.
We do extensive benchmarking all the time, and for sure on an annual basis in conjunction with budget process.
Is that available?
Shoot me a note, I can share that, I'm sure that readily.
Okay. And the other thing is, everything's based on, number of rounds played. I appreciate that. It's tons of rounds played. How many golfers are there in Tellico Village? Do we know how many residents actually contribute to those rounds? Or, is it one guy playing 9,000 times?
Pat?
Pat.
I got 7,500 open, I got a buddy who's got 2,000.
One of these days you'll learn how to do it right, right? Nice job. Is there an answer there?
We've got just under 5,000 people in our golf database, so we estimate 60% of the village plays golf.
So those 5,000 are village, not counties.
Correct. Yeah, that's just in our T-Time database and our digital system that gets all our communications.
He's put a new battery in.
We're good.
Thank you.
All right, we have a question online from Chris G. He would like to know total company. Looks like the salaries have increased $2.2 million since 2020, a 40% increase. Has there been a discussion about an analysis of staff levels, tasks, responsibilities to drive out inefficiencies? So I know Chet and then also Steve, you had just talked about the increase in wages. So.
Sure. Right now, I have a mandate from the board to evaluate all staffing and all costs, and I should have that to them before the end of December. So the short answer is yes. There is a mandate to go out and look at all those things and make some decisions and report on.
Parks and Rec. Pickleplex is obviously the big thing that happened just recently. A lot of activity, a lot of visibility that's happened. Probably the biggest piece is the cooperation between the residents and the POA and the clubs and all of those to make something very special happen there at the rec center. There's some efforts to repurpose some of the rooms. The old racquetball courts weren't being utilized as well, so they made some changes to that and turned it into some cycling classes. They've increased the kayaks and paddle boards, add some additional trainers, which have added some new classes. They now offer 88 fitness classes, of which 49 are different types of classes. So you can see some of those numbers that are there. This is a comparison of what Tellico Village offers in comparison to other similar recreation areas in the area. You see it's pretty broad and pretty all-inclusive, and the rates that are being charged are competitive, if not below the competitive rates. From 22 to 23, you can see the changes on the household and the individual rates. These are, again, number of memberships through October, and we projected out what November, December would be. So increasing for 2023, we anticipate a little bit of an increase in the household members and the same for the individual. Quick summary again of what was driving some of the revenue changes. We increased the rate, and we increased the number of people that are signing up for these memberships. So we see 49,000 of their increase was from rate and 36,000 was from volume. A little bit of merchandise sales. So overall, this is the summary of their P&L with the trends of the last several years. 1.1 million in revenue. A little bit of increase in the salaries. There were some changes to catch up some of their staffing as well. Nothing really unusual. The maintenance costs were up a little bit, and some of the operating supplies. They had some effects of inflation on their supplies for the pools that were fairly substantial. So their net surplus or deficit, and again, 785,000, adding back the depreciation, says that their net subsidy is 438,000. And what called your attention, if you look at the history, from 2020 they were at $1 million, and again, with adding the memberships and adding the efforts that have gone on through there, they have pushed these numbers down to the low $400,000 number. So good efforts by Simon and his team. They have a small amount of capital that they plan to spend for this year. The $120,000 is to court resurfacing that they anticipate. Any questions about Parks and Rec? I've only been over there once, but it's an amazing place. Appreciate that. Food service is something we're going to go back and take a look at this year and do some review of the entire process and the contracts. 23 will be a year to regroup and perhaps make some changes to hopefully change some of the guest experiences. The Kahiti Kitchen is going to be the big project that'll happen. It's been on the books for a while, and so I think we're now getting to the point where it's going to actually occur. Quick summary of where their revenue has been. 585,000 for 2022, increasing slightly to 595,000 for 23 budget. You can see net on that subsidy is 703,000, adding back the depreciation 464,000, and with the exception of the Kahiti Kitchen, there is no additional capital to be expended here. Any questions on the food? Docks and RV.
One quick one,
Oh,
if you don't
sorry.
mind.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to get into details of the contract, but how is that contract annual with food service with AWE? Is that December to December, or how does that work?
Mitzi, can you answer that?
It is annual. It'll renew January 1, and so that's why he said, you know, we're going to reevaluate this
So
year
ta-
and
yeah.
actually relook at food service.
Just to be clear, that contract will be put together in an entirely different way than it has been in the past, and it will also be reviewed once put together by the Finance Committee as well as the board before it goes out to be applied against.
So you mean this next one coming up in this January or the following one?
This January.
Excellent, thank you.
Docks and RV, currently 810 slips. There's some capital in the anticipation of spending the latter part of this year, which will add some slips to that, but they're not included in here only because they won't generate very much revenue in 2023, but will generate for 24. The boat slips, the personal watercraft, and the kayaks, there's a few that are not usable. The water is too shallow, and we have a few that are leased out to T-BART and the watershed and the fire department. So it gives us 938 slips that are available lease, and they stay almost 100% leased.
So Mickey, for those that have come to the prior budget meetings, the change here was adding the docks back in, right, the new dock?
Correct. There's a $300,000 capital expenditure that'll probably get in place. By the time they get it ordered and installed, it'll be latter part of the year. So we don't anticipate any revenue change for this year, but there will be, it will end up paying for itself over time. So RV lots, 258, it's a little bit down, and there was some changes made to the areas to allow the residents to get to their slots more readily. So we lost a couple of slots there. There is some anticipation that we would add some in 2023, even though it was not quite firmed up. So we have a chance to pick up some going into 2023 there. The gas docks, average rate was $4.87 last year. We anticipate a little bit higher rate this year. So our previous methodology was to add 50 cents per gallon to our cost, and that was the rate that we charged. We anticipate paying $5 a gallon, and we're now changing the 2023 budget where we're adding 75 cents per gallon, so that's how we achieve that $5.75. So below that, you see the dock revenue, the new docks, the townhome docks, the RV revenue, and the other, for a total of $1.3 million in 2023. A little bit of a trend on where they've been. So 1.3 in the revenue, cost of sales is fairly flat, keeping our margin about that 62%. Costs are fairly flat. We have some maintenance costs that'll happen for the Cooper docks that we acquired, and so we're going to bring those up to a better level in standards that we have with the rest of the docks. So there's some additional maintenance costs that'll happen this year. Docks generated $344,000 at the net surplus line. Adding the depreciation gets us at $456,000, and the capital is $300,000 of that is the new dock that's anticipated at the latter part of the year. So RV and docks generates a net surplus of $121,000 above and beyond what the capital requirements are for this year.
Well, and just to be clear, technically that 335 is 300 for a dock, a few more dollars. Part of that 35,000 extra is for 6 PWC slips that are shorter and a safety hazard and age because of the new updated wave runners coming in. And then there's power pedestals that we're replacing primarily at the townhome docks. So that's the difference between the 300 for the dock and the 335 that you got here.
Correct. Thank you. Any questions on the docks and RV?
Dominic Andriana again. Just a comment. The 75 cents upcharge that the residents are paying to, the boaters are paying to go to the POA, that's not very well advertised, and I think it'd be advantageous to advertise that because people are always comparing it next door, for example, costs that various marinas, and maybe if people knew there was 75 cents going into the POA, they'd make a different decision.
Okay. Yep.
Ken Litke, glad to see the docks back in. Is it kayak storage too going to be included in that?
No. No.
Why was that excluded? Just curious.
Expense,
It's also revenue producing, isn't it?
and not as much. And the waiting list is not as long. And the Marine Advisory Committee had gone through and looked at 2 different things. Well, actually, there are a number of them. A couple of them were kayak storage at Kahiti and also at Tanasi Basin. Then there was an effort that we put forth last year that I put forth along with moving in dock, as you're aware. And then we took that out because the expense was too great to take up the available spaces that we have between shorelines and gates and actual dock spaces. We were going to utilize those spaces. Still have them in the plans for 2024. The Marine Advisory Committee is still advocating that. But we got to a point, and again, we were charged with, every staff member, every board member, everybody, advisory committee is charged with cut it all out. And if it can't justify to come back, it doesn't come back. And the only thing that we got back was docks.
There's a comment on docks from William Whipple. He says docks have been profitable for years. 75 cents is too much.
Yeah, the 75 cents is the gas, not the docks.
Public Works, So at the water rates, at the top, you can see on the right, there's 2022 rates. There were some changes in how they were structuring the rates. As you can see on the right, it was a decreasing cost per gallon as you went to the higher levels. There were some efforts to try to encourage the residents to conserve, and so the rate structure was changed going into 2023, and you can see there's an increasing cost for the additional gallons that are going to be used going into 2023. Sewer rates went up slightly. There was a change in what the max cutoff was. There were 7,500 gallons on the sewer, and that was reduced to a $5,000 limit for 23. Utility installations, we increased the interceptor tank charge by 1,500, and a total from 10,500 to 12,000. Clayton did a little bit of research at Rarity Bay. They are charging 25,000 for these connections, and so there may be some opportunity for us to look at that as an additional revenue stream, but we'll do so separate from the budget.
Mickey, you may want to mention that on the water rates, with the increasing price per gallon to drive behavior to cut back, one driving factor there was if we didn't cut back, we'd have to spend an additional $10 million on bigger water pipes.
Correct. And if it succeeds in what it's trying to do and everybody uses less water, then it will impact the anticipated revenue for this year. But that's a good thing still.
Yeah, and the other big item in that category is like not Winston, but Clayton talked about earlier, was the alternate days for irrigation. That has a huge impact on water pressures in the village and the future need of a larger capacity pipe, as Steve mentioned.
Utility tank installations. So there's 174 permits going into 23 that we believe were carried over. We'll pick up a total of 140, and they're going to anticipate installing about 17 per month. So we'll utilize the existing 174 up through October, November. Those will be at the lower rate because they've already been agreed to and contracted and paid for. And going into November, December, those last 30 will be at the higher rate. So water, sewer, and installation revenues broken out by period. 7.5 million going into this year. And to that, we add some late fees, facility fees, for a total revenue of 7.6 million. And that decrease is really driven by the connections that were noted back over here. This total amount that are to be paid, there's a fewer number of connections that are going to go in, and so that translates into a decrease in that of about $1 million going into 23. Overall expenditures and revenues, about 31% at the salary from a benefits perspective. We had some increases that were previously mentioned, and so that's driving the overall salary increase. Maintenance costs, you can see there's a decrease there, and some of that is a change in philosophy. Anything that is a recurring maintenance item is left in the operating budget. Anything that is of a capital nature or being paid for out of reserve funds is no longer in the operating budget, and so we see some changes there. Net surplus or deficit of 2.1 million. Adding back the depreciation is 1.6 deficit, and they anticipate spending 4.5 million in capital and maintenance going into 2023 for a net deficit of $6 million. So operating the water and sewer is a very expensive portion of what we do at the POA. Any questions on the Public Works? Another slant by group so we could see a little bit better about what's happening from the water, sewer, utilities, and other departments. Net total is that same, but it lets us see where some of the changes are going to be. In the admin line, we have an assessment. You can see the trend going from 2020 up through 2022. 2022 number was at $153.85. If we increased it at 5%, it goes to $161. If we choose to go to the 9.1%, it raises it to $167.85. So about a $13 or $14 increase to get to that from 2022 to that to 9.1 rate. See the other revenue lines, late fees, marketing, transfers, some of the other fees that we receive through that. Total revenue for the admin group, $15.8 million.
Before you switch, go back to that, please, to highlight. If you take a look at the guys, you've heard this before, but go to the transfer fees, permit revenue, cap fees. In 2023, we're looking at $854,000. We're forecasted this year to have $1,268,000. So we're losing $400,000 off the top for the expansion that we've seen the last several years. It's tailing off. So that cash will go straight to the reserves. It's excess cash, and it's shrinking.
Overall budget for the admin group, $15.8 million anticipated in revenue. There were some open positions on the salaries lines, Chet and myself included, and so those are the compensational numbers that will show up there. Most of the costs are fairly flat going into this year. Some maintenance costs that will happen, we'll see in 2023, generating at the 9.1% as a $10.3 million surplus. There's no additional capital expenditures expected for the admin group. Safety, not a lot going on there. Costs are going up just a little bit on the services line, but otherwise it's pretty flat year over year. And the commercial property, they ended up with about $182,000 in revenue. We anticipate that to be closer to $284,000 as they have fully rented out most of the units. There's one open unit currently. And we see the costs are fairly flat that's going to go in there. We anticipate spending $150,000 in parking lot repairs. That $150,000 will be charged back to the current tenants over a 5-year period. So $30,000 of that cost each year will be allocated to each tenant based upon their square footage going into each of those future years, and that's built into the 2023 revenue number.
So Mickey, back on that one, why is there no depreciation in the budget for next year?
Good question. Don't know that. And I will say that the depreciation numbers that are shown on here, from the time we started the process, we haven't updated, only because every time we go through the iterations of the capital and what's going to be made, it would change those numbers, and until we had an approval. So we'll go back through and make a final change to those once the capital has been approved for this year.
Mickey, it kind of looks like your column has been shifted up one cell. If you look at your 9270, that should be dropped down a box. Everything should be dropped down.
You're right. Looks like that 92. So the 45,000 is probably the depreciation number there. Correct. We'll get that corrected. Any questions on the operating budget?
This is kind of a comment / question if anyone wants to respond. Back to the gas increase, it seems that most of the gas is purchased by POA members, and if they are being abused, even though the boating experience and docks is a profitable business, not like golf, and that was from William Ripple. This is still in conjunction with the increase in gas prices.
Can you say what that was again?
It says, back to the gas increase, it seems that most of the gas is purchased by POA members and that they are being abused, even though the boating experience and docks is a profitable business, not like golf.
So I believe the Finance Committee was recommending increasing the cost of our gas because we were so much lower than competitors. If you compare to like Wind River, Sequoia, and others, we're quite a bit under.
While you got back, Roger George, while you got back to that one, just a couple comments on that. You're right, Marty, most of the time we are less than anyone else. And I think, I don't know what the split is between how much we residents use our gas docks. I'm sure it's the majority, but I don't know the numbers on that. But I think not only for gas, but for restaurants and our amenities here, we should think about possibly doing a little bit of local advertising and that kind of thing, making people aware of, in this case, our gas prices. They throw it around on Nextdoor, but some sort of a little bit of local advertising to bring more people in to use our amenities, gas stocks being one.
Okay, thank you.
Next section of what we have to present is the spreadsheet. This is the capital reserve spending summary. So going into 2023, we expect to have 16.6 million carried over in the reserve funds. At the 9.1% increase, if we choose to do that, we'll generate 7.559 million in reserve contributions. We have the additional 2.4 million that we mentioned earlier that we hope to get from the insurance proceeds on the Tanasi fire. And 521,000 we anticipate from earnings on the funds in the account. There's a few of the strategic spending that we anticipate having going in this year: the accounting software, the Katie Kitchen, the Yacht Club, obviously Tanasi Fire rebuild, the expansion of the sewer and the holding tank and pump station. And we added a line on here as to, only because we don't know what the final design of that Tanasi rebuild would be, so we wanted everybody to be aware that there's still some considerations to be made for that.
Right, so for 2023 and 2024, you have the 4.6 million, which is the replacement cost value for Tanasi from the reserve study from our insurance policies.
Correct.
Anything other than building what we had with the same parking, same building, will cost a different number.
Correct.
Which is not in here.
Correct. The Tanasi rebuild team is looking at all aspects and trying to get some costs together so we can provide some better numbers on that as we go forward.
Yeah, and I guess just to be completely clear on that, you know, the focus has been on, for the rebuild project, options 3 and 4, which were build back bigger or split golf out completely, both of which, back to Steve's point, would be considerably more than what we would expect to get back in insurance proceeds. So that's something that we really have to be looking at and be aware of and figure out how the funding for that would take place. So, because it's, like Steve said, it's not in here. So if we had planned to go bigger, you know, we probably should be adding, you know, $2 million or whatever that number is. I'm just making it up, but some number above what's in here today.
And to that, we'll add a calculation as to what additional revenue streams are going to be generated from that, and hopefully those would be used to offset and build into that decision-making process.
With a new food service.
Possibly.
Under current contract, increased volume generated. That assumes a new food service contract, because under the current contract, if you raised volume through a Tanasi restaurant by 100%, we'd see zero of it.
Correct.
One other point, with currently, of course, we're using the Yacht Club 11 to 4. That's something new. In the past, when we had all the restaurants, Yacht Club was used for meals 25 hours a week, very underutilized. So the question is, do we in fact need, and this breaks my heart because I love Tanasi, do we need 3 full-size restaurants to take care of all our residents happily?
That's a good question. All part of the discernment process, right? So, yes.
So on the reserve schedule, we've gone through the process, and only the amounts that are showing in 2023 have been seen by the board and have been tentatively discussed as being something that we would accept. All of the amounts that are in these out periods are perhaps good ideas, and maybe they're something that we want to vote on in future periods. But for today's conversation, this amounts that are in this column L are only the 2023 expenditures that are going to be looked at. So nothing from an admin perspective. Docks, as we talked about, was the $15,000 for the jet ski slips, $20,000 for the docks. Food, there are no expenditures for 2023 anticipated. As we get into golf, you can see a few of the things there, and some fans. There's a truck replacement, and again, we've tried to go through and look at what is going to take us to maintain our fleets, and so you can see in these out periods some estimates as to when we're going to have to replace some of those vehicles. There's some mowers that we have to anticipate replacing at the golf centers, some blowers, and a utility vehicle. Parks and Rec, as we had mentioned, 2 $60,000 court resurfacing and 1 small vehicle that they anticipate replace or upgrading. Public Works is obviously our biggest one. You can see through there's a lot of spending. We went through a water system improvement study, the Jacob study, and each of these items out here anticipate the required spending in order to keep our water system operational based upon what was recommended through that study.
I want to make a quick comment, Mickey. Back in Parks, somebody made a comment, actually an email to the board asking about, we're starting to really look at details here, but asking about the vehicle purchase for $12,000. And I guess my point there is, whenever these things come up for actual purchase, even though it made the budget, doesn't necessarily mean that we'll end up getting it. So everything has to be justified before the expenditure takes place.
There was an initial plan to replace all of the meters with these smart meters and the new technology, which would allow us to be able to manage the flow on each of the meters. When we initially did the initial study, it was anticipated that it was going to be a more viable pursuit. We determined at this point in time that we weren't quite ready to take that step, so we reduced it back to finish up the 1,000 meters, and then future periods we'll go through and we'll try to evaluate what the savings are, what the impacts to our revenue is going to be, and how that'll compare to the cost for those future periods. There was a 10-year road maintenance plan, and so we've now added those amounts through those periods so we could anticipate the additional impacts of what our roads are going to be needing over this time. Similarly, there's an excuse me, an HVAC replacement plan that has been put in place as well. At the commercial, there's the $150,000 for the parking lot, mill and pave. In addition to that, what we saw going into these periods, and we anticipate and have a better vision over the next 5 or so years, but in these out periods, we don't know exactly what's anticipated. So we added lines in here for unforeseen spending, try to keep us in mind so that the anticipation of $8 million or so in the way of spending each year and how that will compare to the funds that are generated. So the beginning balance plus the additional sources of revenues or funding for the reserves minus the $7.9 million leaves us going out of the end of 2023 with 19.2 million. That revolves into the future periods, plus the anticipated payments, minus these expenditures, allows us to trend out over a period of time that if these things happen on the slate that we anticipate, we end up with 26 million in the reserve funds at the end of 2031. Any questions? I know there's a lot of detail there.
The only thing I would say, Mickey, when you added in that 8.488 in those out years, that's basically sustaining capital that there's no way you'll be able to forecast today, but there is a level of sustaining that you know you're going to have.
Correct. And we've seen from these first years that that level is somewhere between 7 and 9 million. So we took a track that we would forecast an amount that would keep us about that middle of the $8 million number. So having gone through all of the budgets and all of the operational side and these capital, I think the FAC has gone in and we've provided this information to them, and they have made a recommendation that the numbers as were outlined in these schedules be approved. And I think we're at the point where we need discussions and then final approval. And I believe the process was that in prior years you went division by division and managed the approval of the rate fees individually.
All righty then, everybody's going to look at each other, so I'll jump in. Let's start with the first division of admin, correct? Golf? Oh, them.
Sorry.
We can move on from golf, don't worry about golf.
In the same order as they were in the presentation.
Roger that. Okay, golf. Board, do we have any discussion on the golf fees or where we're going with that?
We just need a motion to approve the changes in the golf fees for 2023. So we'll have a motion and a second to accept the changes in the fee structure for golf, which is roughly 5% for residents and 8% for members, not for guests, sorry, for guests.
All those in favor? All those opposed, the same sign.
Okay, that's 7-0. Passed.
All right, move on. Parks and Rec. Do we have a motion to approve the Parks and Rec's budget and fees? Yes.
Second.
Okay.
Oh,
Hang on, I think Pat had a question.
No, Steve got the second. He beat me.
Moved by,
Oh, okay.
motion
Thank you,
by,
Pat.
motion by John,
not a
second
competition,
by
guys.
Steve to accept the 2023 fee schedule for Parks and Rec.
All those
Any
in favor?
discussion?
And that increase was approximately
I think that was,
6%, wasn't it? Yeah.
I wrote it down at one point, I don't remember now off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, it went from, for like household from 608 to 638.
Yeah.
I guess I have to calculate that percentage. I think it's roughly 5%, 5 to 6%. All in favor? Pass 7-0.
On the food, there's no anticipation of a scheduled increase in the menu. However, they will monitor the costs that are being incurred, and they will make those increases on the food costs to maintain the margin for them.
I would like to put a motion out for the board to consider that you give me the directive to create and develop a new contract for food services for 2023, and that go out for bid and be accepted.
So moved.
Second.
Did I have a second on that? John? Okay. So it's been moved in second for Chet to grab the AWE contract and modify it for 2023. And then, well, Yeah.
From my perspective, we're going to create an RFP and send it out to vendors. That vendor may include definitely AWE, but we're not going to reproduce the same scenario and just push it forward. We're going back to ground zero and rewriting how we handle this.
So we have a motion and a second to re-review or to change the food contract. And Chet will take the lead on that. Any more discussion? All in favor? 7-0.
Steve, your enthusiasm is noted there, brother.
I enjoy this part of it.
All right, next.
Docks and RV?
Ducks and RV, can I have a motion on this one? Pat? It's been moved in second to, I think the only change here is to increase the dock fee by 3%. Correct, Pat?
Yes, and, yeah.
Well, and the gas by 75
Gas by adding your 75 cents, and kayak stays the same.
Yeah, so the cost per gallon is increasing from 50 cents to 75 cents, and then the slip fees up 3%.
Right.
Any discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor? Pass 7-0.
Water, sewer. and
Water
utility
sewer
installations.
rates. Can I have a motion to adopt the new rates as presented?
Make the motion.
Second.
Moved in second to adopt the rates as presented from the Finance Advisory Committee. Any discussion?
Yes, I would like to thank the Finance Advisory Committee, that subcommittee that went through here, particularly Brad and John, I think led up that charge to reverse this. This has been going on a long time, and there were valid reasons for the other way of doing it, but this is much more in line the way our population is going and the way we use water. So thank you both very much for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Great job.
Okay. Any other comments? Call for a vote. All in favor of adopting this water and sewer rate schedule for 2023? 7-0 passed. Is there anything to vote on in commercial?
Well, you have the water and sewer connection fee that's got to be approved.
Oh, is that on there yet? Oh, I'm sorry. So I need on top of that, I need a motion to accept the increase in the interceptor tank charge. Pat? Can I have a second? Bob? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of increasing the interceptor tank charge by $1,500? 7-0 pass.
Well, go back down there. There's one more thing. Did we increase all those connection fees too?
They're all the same.
They're all the same, okay.
There's no changes necessarily on these rates. Just wanted everybody to be aware of that. There was $150,000 that we spent on the commercial that's going to be allocated over to each of the tenants over a 5-year period based on their square footage.
Okay.
And the last piece that I failed to include in here, I apologize for that, is the admin fees. And the assessments.
So before we get to that, I think we have to approve the capital plan too, correct?
We do.
And the budget. And the budget, yeah. But you really need to decide what you're going to charge for assessment first. Yeah.
I'm just looking down through my list, sorry.
So yes, there needs to be a motion for the assessment.
All right, we'll start with the assessment since that's what's pulled up. Can I have a motion on the assessment increase?
Well, which one?
I'll make a
asking for it.
motion that the board approves the recommendation from the FAC to increase assessments 9.1%.
It's been moved in second to approve the recommended increase on the assessment from our 9.1%, which is equivalent to $14 a month or $168 a year. Any discussion?
What would be options of going lower than this, perhaps to look at what COLA is right now from a Social Security perspective, to maybe make it neutral to that increase?
I don't think our CNRs allowed us to calculate on COLA.
I thought we said that it could be anywhere between 5 and
And that's what we're doing, so-
9.1.
Yeah, the CNRs allow for a maximum increase
Right.
to be established by the
Right.
board to either exceed 5, not to exceed 5% or the CPI.
Yeah. So what then happens, as we've done in years past, started off, Steve made a motion, 9.1, I second it. Discussion, call for a vote. If it fails, you go to the next one.
Just to clarify, Kevin, it's not an either or.
No.
Correct.
It's anywhere up to 9.1% this year, given the CPI increase.
Could be zero.
That's correct.
So what we're doing is we're voting on what the Finance Committee recommended. So based on the reserve study, based on where we're at with Tanasi, based on our other expenses that are identified in the budget, that's where they're recommending the 9.1%.
And let me add to this. Just waking up early in the morning and watching the news, this is blowing me away. 40% increase in airfares, starting immediately. There are less than 500 rentals in the city of Knoxville. Rental prices are going through the roof. Residents are being priced out of Knoxville. They can't renew their leases, and they're having to move because of the increase in rates. National looming rail strike. You remember the ship that got crossed up in the Suez Canal and what it did at just-in-time transit? Imagine what a rail strike is about to do to us. WBIR, just yesterday, 10,000 layoffs from Amazon, and the Knoxville Distribution Center for Amazon has been put on hold or delayed. 11/15, I saw that actually the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. Facebook just laid off 11,000 people. Twitter just laid off 11,000 people. If you go on YouTube and you go down and you look, they're taking the double digits, but there's an awful lot of people with 5, 6, 8,000 people that are laying off. The economy's not looking good, folks. And the POA is living on a fixed income just like I am, just like everybody sitting on this board is. So there's a choice coming up, and that choice is we can use this opportunity. Hopefully next year the economy will be better, and we won't have to do this, or the won't calculate. CPI will not calculate to 9.1%, and we can go back to 5 or 3 or 2.5. But we're not in the position to be at a 2% or a 3% or even a 5% going into the next year where the economy's coming. If you don't have it in the bank, you're going to lose it. If you just lose it just by letting it sit in the bank, it's going away. So,
As another perspective to this as well, throughout the country, HOAs, POAs, people who I've worked with for years and talk with, on average, they're going up 15% on their dues. There are those who are going up more than that because of the economy of their area and their local area. This is unprecedented times, and it is requiring painful and unprecedented increases.
and I've said this before in this meeting, in the finance advisory meetings, and in the review meetings, I don't like paying for golf. I don't like paying for recreation. I don't like paying for my 3 boat slips. I don't even like paying when I go to a restaurant. I don't like paying for nothing. I want everything at a senior discount. I want everything at free. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And unfortunately, let me turn to you guys and make sure there's a camera looking at me. Unfortunately, I'm sitting on this board having to vote for this bank account, this savings account, this reserve that is going to get this community at least through the next year. And I wish every one of you were sitting here able to cast this vote today, because I don't want to do it, because I want it for free.
Good for
Any more comments from the board?
Just a reminder that the reserve study, which is the first one that's been completed in the history of this village, has given us data we've not had before, and the targeted funding of reserves initially in the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 years will be about $8 million a year. And at 9.1 million, at 9.1%, you generate almost that $8 million. Each percentage point is equated to $125,000 a year. So when you take a look at the numbers, what you need for reserves and what you need to support the water and sewer system, at 9.1, you're barely getting that 8 million put into the reserves.
Any other comments from the board? All right, from residents. Don?
Pat, I'm with you. I don't want to spend for anything either.
I knew you were.
Okay? I mean, that's good advice you gave me, except it doesn't work, as you've pointed out. But here, setting the joke aside for the moment, the CPI really bothers me because it's not CPI, it's CPI-U, which is urban. And that means that all the data that we're using to arrive at 9.1% is coming out of urban data, which excludes food and fuel. We are not locked into CPI. There's any other matrices that can be used to arrive at information that is applicable to Tellico Village. And I don't think that the CPI is applicable to Tellico Village at all. And I know that that's what we're stuck with going forward as far as 2023 is concerned, but I think that we've got to take a very, very serious look and see that we have data that is suitable for who we are, what we are, and all of the financials that go into this budget. We've got to be looked at very, very carefully going forward. Let me point out one other item, if I may, because I've heard no discussion about this at all. It's my understanding that there's about 1,500, 1,600 lots that have not been built on but are owned. Can we really build on some of these lots? I'm looking at one in my neighborhood, and I'm telling you, that incline is like this. I don't know what the degree is, but it's insane. And I'm really surprised that this can be built on. We have to take a very, very close look at where we're going over the next 5 to 10 years as to what we're going to look like if we're going to build on all of these lots, which I don't think is advisable. And I'm asking the board to take a very hard look at this. Thank you.
I guess, Don, the one comment I'd have is, let's say that a 3% increase got us our $8 million in funding for reserves, then I'd be making a different motion. But even at 9.1, we don't get to the 8 million. We're close. And it's in our declaration, as you know. That is what we're given to deal with the range of what you can do with assessments.
Hi, Kevin Flanagan here. I just want to make sure I heard a comment you made just a second ago. And with the 9.1 increase, it's $168 per year additional. Is that correct?
$14 a month. Yeah.
I think there's no problem with that. Thank you.
Roger Forsyth. You guys are doing a great job in trying to control costs and increase revenues, but there's one little sliver of the pie that's in the middle, which is called efficiencies. Cost waste reduction, there's a piece in there that you can gain more by looking at your processes and procedures and looking for those inefficiencies. So you got both ends, but the middle is the people and the processes. Thank you.
And that's a very good point, and that certainly is a challenge that we, the board, put out to Chet when he came in, because, you know, one of the good things about having somebody new in, they've got different experiences, different ideas, different ways of looking at things. So that certainly is a challenge we put out to Chet, and look at how we're operating, and are there ways that we can be more efficient. And we also have, I mean, we have had over the last several years, what do you call it? Continuous improvement, sorry. That Mitzi's been leading the charge on in terms of looking for efficiencies. And that's asking the people that are doing the work. And I think that's been a very positive story. What was it? Over the last 5 years, over $1 million worth of efficiencies. So those are things that, I'm not saying we're perfect at it, but those are certainly things that we are aware of and trying to hone in on and capture as much as we can. It's all of our dollars. Very good point.
I've been in all the review meetings and that kind of thing, sitting and listening, and for the most part, I understand the need to build the reserves and that kind of thing. The only one question in the back of my mind, if I can articulate it properly, the reserve study, first one we've ever done, correct? It was just completed a couple months ago and presented to the board last month? Maybe couple. So we've had new data that we've never dealt with before for 2 months. So my question is, and my wonder is, are we maybe jumping the gun on having like we got a crisis? There's, you know, assumptions that go into that model. Have we had time to really look at those things now that we've got our numbers, look them over, say, was that the right assumption? You know, really study it a bit, study the outcome a bit, and then make this decision. And it may still come out to be 9.1, and along that same line, if we delay to say we go at 5%, stay at 5% this year, and then we reevaluate and find that we didn't need the 9.1, or yes, we do need the 9.1. That 1 year delay to study this a bit more, and that, what impact does that really have on us in the next 5 years? What do we?
$2.5 million.
Okay, we lose 2.5.
That's correct.
Okay.
So
Because it compounds.
And I don't think it's fair to say either that we haven't studied it, because the Finance Committee has spent a lot of time reviewing those numbers, working with the outside company as they were even putting it together. And I guess I just want to address one of the words you mentioned, was crisis. I don't view it as a crisis. With people I talk to, I say I think we as a community are in very good financial condition, very good.
Great.
We need to be looking forward, though, in terms of what our potential capital outlays are going to need to be, and be responsible now so that we're not caught with, okay, how are we going to fund this should some emergency happen, like Tanasi.
Yeah, and I'm not debating that at all, that we need to build the reserves. And I'm not saying the Finance Committee didn't have a lot of input in that, but I know there's a lot of numbers and things that crunch in those models, a lot of assumptions and that kind of thing. And all I'm saying is, no matter how good you are, I know a lot of times in business I've been in, I'll have a conclusion come up, and I think I'm pretty solid. And when I look back at it and maybe a little bit longer and study it, I find that perhaps there was some tweaking I could have done. Either way.
Yeah. Agreed.
So that's just my...
Agreed. And this will be something that gets reassessed every year, right? So if we find, well, but it'll impact the following years.
But here's the great news. Take a look at the qualifications of Brad Spiegel, John Orr, myself. and the rest of the board that's looked at this study? That's number one. Number two, let's suppose the 9.1 should have been 7. Well, guess what happens when we reassess the reserve model? Because we have the working model. That's now in Mickey's hands. You take a look, next year we get the budget season, what do you need? Well, maybe you back down because you don't need it. So the issue here is the model and the review by the FAC says we need about 8 million. So you have an opportunity to get to 8 million right in here, pretty close. Let's truck it and see, let's book it and see what happens.
So you answered my question. You guys feel real comfortable with all the work that you went in? You're good to go? I'm good then.
Yeah, can I go back and revisit my previous question? Are we in the right place now about which reserves are which? Amenities reserves, total reserves? Is this the right time? Sure. Well, I'll throw it out, and if it's not, tell me to wait again.
Funding of all the reserves, I thought.
No, what Bob's talking about is splitting out the reserve from what's new amenities versus what's replacement and repair. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And we had a discussion about that this morning. We're going to have a formal proposal from Chet as to how to break down these reserves, because you got the other issue, is you've got water and sewer, which to me is a separate entity because you get funded by your water and sewer bill.
Okay.
You have all the other areas, maintenance, with docks, roads, et cetera.
Right.
And then you have what's new.
Sure.
Because the reserve study was for funding of replacement and repair of existing.
Correct.
So anything,
That
as
was
an
the-
example, anything new on Tanasi
Right.
is not in the reserve.
Understand, but that's an intent. There's nothing that says.
No, that's what I said. Chet will come up with a recommendation next month.
Yeah, and
So,
I
yeah.
guess the point I want to make too
Yeah.
is that, yes, that's the intent from the reserve study. That is not how we operated in the past. We had an amenity reserve.
Right.
Right? And we still do. We have an amenity reserve. If we pull that up here, I'm not sure where it is, but it's close to $5 million.
Okay.
And we have an R&M reserve, and we have a water and sewer reserve. Those are the three main reserves that we have today.
Okay.
So what we're working on, what Chet is going to work on is, how do we say, okay, what we have today in amenity reserves, what's the breakdown on that between new amenities or adding to existing amenities, or,
Repairing and replacing.
yeah, because in my mind, the R&M, repair and maintenance, would be that category. But that's where we need to get straight and be clear on, right?
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to get the impression that what we have in reserves today, none of that can be used for, say, Tanasi, for example, right? Because that's a replacement amenity. So it's possible some of that, if it's deemed the right use of those funds, then we would do it.
As a replacement amenity, but as a new amenity, the reserve that we've been talking about that needs to be funded, needs to have this extra percentage, that's not for new amenities, right?
As per the reserve study,
that's-
correct.
that's what-
And this discussion of what you set aside and break has absolutely nothing to do with the 9.1 versus a 5 or a 7. The plain fact of the matter is you've got to replace and renew and maintain for about $8 million a year.
Okay.
So what we got to get clear is, okay, so now that you have this established and you have the current balances, how are they spread between new amenities, water and sewer, and other? And Chet's going to come with a plan to the board next month and be reviewed in the open meeting.
Okay, thanks.
I really don't want to drag out that discussion, but I want to be sure that everybody understands that in most cases, okay, in all cases, reserves are broken out on paper. There's one reserve account. There's one reserve bank account. And all the monies from all the different directions that we've already designated, that money goes into the reserve account. Well, that goes in there. When we look at putting in a new amenity or repairing it, that's all coming out of reserves as it stands. Now, what they've asked me to look at is, do we need to start building a separate budget completely for new amenities and excluding any of the repairs or maintenance, so that we have those completely divided? And in my mind, in any other property that I've ever managed, it's one pile of money. During the budget process, you're saying, we're going to spend, I'm using round numbers, so don't take this as gospel. We're going to spend $1 million over here on a new amenity, but we've got $7 million over here we have to spend on roads and sewer and blah, 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 blah. There's just a whole list of things. Still $8 million. But we've defined how we're going to spend that $8 million, or what our intent is in spending that. The board's already pointed out that even though it's in this budget, it doesn't mean the dollars are going to be spent. It means we're approving the possibility or the process of doing that.
Understand. But again, rewind the tape to last week, and I asked the question then, can you take this reserve fund and use it for new amenities? And the answer I got from everybody here was no, that would never happen.
Actually, you got that answer from the head of the Finance Committee.
No, I got it from board members as well.
Yeah, we were referring to the money needed as stated from the reserve study.
Correct.
So what we need to do now is apply that rule to what we have been doing historically, right? So historically, we've been putting money into an amenity reserve that has been used for new amenities.
Sure. I guess I'm not.
So for the sake of this discussion,
Yeah, but it just sounds like there's a contradiction. The contradiction is, that I'm hearing, maybe I'm hearing it wrong, is that the reason we're going up to 9.1 is to fund this amenity reserve, primarily to fund the amenity reserve, not the amenity reserve, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
To fund the reserves.
Correct.
As a result of the study that said
Correct.
we have so many more assets.
Right.
That's absolutely correct.
So you're basing that 9.1% increase on that.
That's
Then
correct.
Then you're saying, once we get that money in there, we can spend it for new amenities if we want. That's what you
That's
just
not
said.
what they're saying. That is what I implied. You're correct.
And that's why I'm saying.
But that's not what the board is saying, and frankly, that's not what they're voting on. They've asked me to come back with a evaluation of how we divide this up and how we have an amenities budget and a maintenance and repair. So let's be clear. What they're voting on right now is not what you and I are discussing. They're voting on $8 million for repair and maintenance, reserves, period. End of story. Nothing to add to that.
Right, but my final comment, you're saying you're going to discuss later how to divide it up. Do you
No, I'm going
understand?
to discuss how do you plan to put in new amenities without any money? That's what I'm going to discuss.
Oh, that should be a different.
It is a different discussion. That's my point. That's it.
So I have two items. I sit on two boards in Florida, condominium associations. Your 9% recommendation is extremely conservative, very conservative. I wish it was, not you guys, I wish my other ones were as low as 9. Secondly, is you're arguing about 9 and 5%. 9 sounds like a big number, but out of my pocket is $6 a month.
$6.30.
You're wasting a lot of time on a non-issue, in my opinion. I encourage the board to vote for 9.1%.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any more comments? All right, thank you. Anything online? All right, I'm going to call for a vote.
All right, this is from Fred. He says, I'm amazed that this is the first reserve study that has ever been done in TV. Being on a Florida POA board, it is law. Congrats to the board for getting it done. So that was just a comment.
Okay, going to call for a vote. All in favor of increasing the assessment 9.1% or $14 a month over what we pay today, or $168 a year? All in favor? All opposed? 5-2. 5-2. Yeah.
John, you voted for or against? For, okay, good. You said your hands still.
Yeah, dissenting were Bob and Rick. So can I have a motion to approve the capital plan for 2023?
So moved.
It's been moved and second to approve the capital plan for 2023. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote. All in favor of approving the capital plan as presented, raise your right hand. All opposed? 6-1. Rick dissenting.
The last thing on here are the expenses that were outlined through all of the individuals, which roll up into this summary. And I think you should probably make a consideration about how we structure those as well.
So what are you asking, Mickey?
We've been voting on the revenue side.
Yeah.
There hasn't been any consideration to the expense side.
No,
So,
the
yeah, we're
budget,
gonna-
the budgeted expenses.
We're gonna, yeah, we're gonna
Right,
approve.
correct.
That'll be the next thing, right? We'll approve, so can I have a motion to approve the operating budget as presented? John, second? Second by Bob. Any discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor of approving the operating budget as presented? Raise your right hand. All opposed? 6-1. Rick dissenting. I believe that's it.
The only other thing is the 990 was filed. That is the annual IRS informational return that was filed on the 15th. And Mickey, at some point, that should be posted to the POM Finance webpage.
Any others?
We had a comment way back on, but it just wasn't relevant to the budget. The question was asked about the Public Works trailer, Chet, that you mentioned that we're going to have to tear down. Yes. Will there be any insurance coverage on that?
That building is so old that it has no coverage or anything else that I'm aware of.
Mike, will you do your mic?
I'm not aware of any coverage on that building because of it being so old. We were just using it as storage and a place for them to meet. So the answer is no. Sorry, short answer.
Okay, Pat.
I got one. Actually, I have two. It's a typical commitment that I reviewed last month. I make it again this month. I committed to the Marine Advisory Committee and the dock captains that I would make this announcement during October, November, December board meetings. All slip lease renewal payments must be received by January 15th, 2023. Many of us travel or have winter residences. We continue to pay mortgage, utilities, and other payments during this time. In 2022, we had a final 42 slip users not renew their slip by May the 1st, 2022. And there were many more in the hundreds during January through March. So there are currently 180 plus property owners on the slip wait list. I asked that each of you with a slip being leased, read your lease during the remainder of November and December and comply with the agreement by January 15th, 2023. If you can't find that lease agreement, a copy can be provided by Josh at the POA office. Please be timely this year, okay? Second thing is that working for Chris has been a joy. I hope the cart barn goes in. We don't have to scrape windshields and move up and down the cart paths anymore. I want to thank those people that have helped. It's been a joy to meet all these new people out there, both men and women, old and young, golfers and non-golfers. But what I've learned is that when daylight savings time changed, my driving habits did not change, but the time of day did. And so what I'm finding is I'm seeing people walking on the side of the road at times I'm not used to seeing them walking in a different lighting situation. I'm asking you, be careful out there. You will hurt as bad, believe me, if you hit a human being as they will hurt if you hit them. Do not, please, have a little common courtesy if you're a walker, a little common courtesy if you're a driver. Slow down a bit. Wave. Happy winter, everybody, and have a good time, okay? Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. One of the things I wanted to add to that is we've been asked to put up signs, and my response is we need to keep reminding homeowners to slow down and be aware of the fact that we do not have sidewalks, that people do walk in the street, and they walk in the street with their dogs all the time. Please be aware of that. Putting up additional signs, it has been my experience that nobody reads, and that, and if they can read, they don't follow what they read. So at this point, I think my point is to just keep badgering you about slow down. People are involved. And I promise you, it will be the hardest day of my job to come to a board meeting and report of somebody dying, being hit by a car because you guys wouldn't slow down, just so you know.
You'll see here at the screen just a live photo. Here's the progress from just today alone. This is the WATE camera, and you can see Pat, that you may have a roof tomorrow.
I'm not going down there tomorrow.
All right, Kevin had another.
Yeah, just a brief update. The board had asked me to provide some status on the negotiation with AT&T relative to obtaining access to POA easement rights for expansion and installation of infrastructure for cable and internet service. Short answer is that those negotiations are still ongoing. So AT&T will not be undertaking any service expansion unless and until an agreement is reached with the POA relative to access to the POA's easements.
Okay, thanks. Any others from the board? Any others from the residents? Susan?
Thank you, Marty. I'd like to ask what can be done about Marathon. Marathon.
The Marathon Station?
You're all aware of a lot of the complaints and so on. Is there anything that can be done to check the food safety issue?
Susan, we
cleanliness
still didn't hear
inside?
what you said.
Can anything be done to address the issue of Marathon?
Marathon, oh.
Yes. And so, I know we don't own it, however, it's there, and what can be done? Do the residents also need to be involved in whatever can be done? Can this be looked at and brought back up so that some of the issues there can really be addressed? Thank you.
I believe there was some talks about looking at the Red Book, like, right, Clayton? Updating that?
You know, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that comment was directed at, but we do have control over that, over the exterior appearance of that property pursuant to the Red Book as a commercial property. So if there are specific exterior aesthetics concerns, those can be addressed through the Red Book.
I think she's referring to, food safety.
Yeah.
I would say you would need to call the health
Yeah,
department.
food
if
quality,
you,
we have no authority there.
Okay.
I used to own gas stations. So the question is, who owns the land? Does Marathon own that land, or do we own the land? Marathon owns the land.
They own the land.
And a whole heck of a lot you can do about it.
Okay, Roger.
All right, some of this is going to be, in a way, I feel too late to the game, but hopefully what I've done had some influence on it. I had asked initially, first of all, I'm Roger George. I've been here 14 years. I eat out often, go to a men's dinner group every Wednesday night. I supported the 11 to 4 lunch at the Yacht Club primarily because if we don't, we as residents and property owners have a responsibility to support things before we can affect to have any change. You can't just sit there and complain about things. So I did what I call a detailed review of the food services over the last 6 weeks. Thanks to Mitzi, Jessica, Andy of AWE, Beth, some of the board members. I initially was planning on providing a detailed kind of outline of what I found out. But I've decided that rather than look in the past, and partly, you know, Marty, we talked about this a little bit, it does no good to go back. So I want to look forward. It appears to me since Chet and Mickey got here, in the board meetings I've attended, that the willingness or the openness to think about changes to food services had not been there in the past, at least not publicly to where we saw any discussion on it. So I'm going to just basically give a couple suggestions out of respect for Chet and Mickey going forward and your commitment. Hang on. Your commitment to look into the food services, which I think really needs to be done. Appreciate that. I believe you're taking the appropriate steps, something that's been needed for a long time. So, I just had, I guess I can narrow it down to one recommendation at this point, and that is highly consider, even going into your review, of establishing a food advisory committee. We've got advisory committees for every other amenity. The Finance Committee proved how powerful and how resourceful and how the benefit of a good committee, how they can help the board and everybody make decisions. So I think we need to have that. They could help in the process of putting together the new bid packages. They can be helpful developing what we want to see out of our food services in the long run. And then once we've made those changes that you guys are going to look into, I think they still have a benefit to provide information, surveys, and things like that as far as now that we have the service, whatever it is or whoever it is, are they meeting our performance goals? Are we getting satisfaction? Are we satisfying the customer who happens to be the property owners? So I see there's a purpose in that group immediately. And I've got to think that there are probably former restaurant operators, institutional service providers, management companies, people with POA, past other POA experiences with food services that would be good candidates to be on this committee. And I won't waste any more of your time on that. Thank you for looking into it. One little thing for property owners. One of the things that started me on this, I don't know, was a pet peeve of next door people spreading misinformation, rumors. So I'm saying to all property owners, no matter whether it's food service or anything else, get your facts straight first, then have a discussion about it. But don't go out there spreading a bunch of bull that I heard, I was speaking to such and so, and they thought. It does no good. So get your act together, get the facts, and try to make a change for the better.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate it. And if you have questions, please come to the board or to POA staff.
What's that number again?
Any other comments?
I just have one plug, is we are less than 20 hours away from the end of the board election. And so if you haven't voted and you're going to vote, you need to vote. And you can go directly to the vote website, which is votepoa.org. You do not have to go to the Property Owners Association website first. The results will be Friday at 2 p.m. at the POA conference room.
And you got your voting credentials in the U.S. mail? Yes. All right. With that, have a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.